20 years ago, $100 could cover a full night out, dinner, a movie, and drinks. Today, it may barely pay for a meal, and in the future, its purchasing power will likely shrink even more. This decline isn't an accident, it's a built-in feature of modern financial systems called inflation, which gradually reduces what money can buy and affects everyone's income, savings, and future. To understand why this happens, we need to look at how modern money works, why governments allow inflation, and how individuals can protect their wealth. What is fiat money and why it exists? Most of the money people use today is known as fiat currency. This includes major global currencies like the US dollar, euro, British pound, and Japanese yen. Unlike ancient coins made from gold or silver, fiat money has no intrinsic value. Its worth comes entirely from public trust in the government that issues it. In simple terms, fiat money functions because people collectively agree it has value. A useful way to think about it is like event tickets. A concert ticket works because everyone accepts it as valid entry. But if organizers suddenly print far more tickets than available seats, each ticket becomes less valuable. The same principle applies to money. When central banks increase the supply of money faster than the production of goods and services, each unit of currency buys less. Prices rise, purchasing power falls, and inflation occurs. However, money creation is not the only cause of rising prices. Economic factors such as supply chain disruptions, energy price increases, labor costs, and geopolitical events can also push prices upward. Still, over long periods, excessive growth in money supply remains one of the primary drivers of sustained inflation. How the world transitioned to modern money. To understand why today's currencies function this way, it helps to examine the historical shift that created the modern financial system. In 1944, toward the end of World War II, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to rebuild the international economic order. The agreement established a system where the US dollar was backed by gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, and other currencies were tied to the dollar. This structure limited how much money governments could create because currency issuance was linked to a finite resource: gold. For decades, this system provided stability. But by the late 1960s, economic pressures began to strain the arrangement. The United States faced rising expenses from the Vietnam War and expansive domestic programs, increasing the number of dollars in circulation. Meanwhile, other countries began exchanging their dollars for gold, reducing U.S. reserves. In 1971, President Richard Nixon ended the dollar's convertibility into gold in what became known as the Nixon Shock. This decision effectively dismantled the gold-backed system and transformed the dollar, and eventually most global currencies, into purely fiat money supported only by government credibility. From that point forward, governments gained far greater flexibility to expand money supply without being constrained by physical reserves. Why governments allow inflation? A common question arises. If inflation reduces the value of money, why would policymakers allow it to happen? The answer lies in how modern economies function. Today's financial systems rely heavily on borrowing. Governments issue debt to fund public spending. Businesses borrow to invest and grow. Individuals take loans for homes, education, and consumption. If money increased in value over time, a situation known as deflation, repaying debt would become increasingly difficult. People would delay purchases, expecting prices to fall further. Businesses would struggle with declining demand, investment would slow, and economic activity could contract sharply. Because of these risks, central banks typically aim for moderate inflation, often around 2% annually. This level is considered sufficient to encourage spending and investment while avoiding excessive price instability. Although 2% inflation may appear insignificant, its long-term effects are substantial. Over a decade, this rate can reduce purchasing power by roughly 20%. Over several decades, the impact becomes even more dramatic. For example, the purchasing power of the US dollar has declined significantly since the early 1970s. While wages and incomes have also risen, they have not always kept pace with price increases, contributing to widespread concerns about affordability and cost of living. When inflation becomes extreme. While moderate inflation is common in developed economies, history shows that poorly managed monetary policy can lead to severe outcomes. Hyperinflation, extremely rapid price increases, can destroy savings and destabilize entire societies. In Zimbabwe during the 2000s, inflation became so extreme that prices doubled within hours, and currency notes were printed in trillions. Venezuela experienced a similar crisis in the 2010s, where economic mismanagement and excessive money creation led to widespread financial collapse. Other countries have also struggled with persistent inflation. Argentina has experienced periods of triple-digit inflation, while Turkey has faced significant currency depreciation in recent years. These examples demonstrate how fragile public trust in money can be when economic policies fail. At the core of every currency system lies trust. Once confidence in a currency collapses, its value can decline rapidly, sometimes beyond recovery. Is currency devaluation inevitable? Some economists argue that all fiat currencies eventually lose value because governments face strong incentives to increase spending and expand money supply. Over time, excessive borrowing and currency creation can erode confidence. However, supporters of fiat systems contend that controlled inflation is essential for economic stability. They argue that flexible monetary policy allows governments to respond to crises, stabilize financial markets, and support economic recovery during recessions. This debate has led to ongoing discussions about alternative monetary systems, alternatives to fiat currency. Critics of modern monetary policy often advocate for hard money, currency tied to scarce resources that cannot be easily expanded. Historically, gold served this role. Because its supply grows slowly, it naturally limits excessive currency creation. Advocates argue that returning to a gold-backed system could prevent governments from overspending and protect purchasing power. In recent years, digital assets such as Bitcoin have emerged as another proposed alternative. Bitcoin has a fixed supply capped at 21 million coins, making it resistant to inflation by design. Supporters view it as a decentralized store of value independent of government control. However, critics argue that systems based on rigid supply limits could reduce governments' ability to respond to financial crises. Without the power to expand money supply, economic downturns could become deeper, leading to higher unemployment and widespread financial distress. For now, there is no global movement to replace fiat currencies, and the current system remains dominant. How people try to protect their wealth. Because inflation gradually reduces purchasing power, many individuals seek ways to preserve the value of their savings over time. One common approach is investing in assets that cannot be easily created or expanded. Gold has historically served as a store of value. After the end of the gold standard in the early 1970s, gold prices rose significantly over the following decades, reflecting its role as protection against currency depreciation. Real estate is another widely used hedge against inflation. Property values often rise over time alongside increasing costs of materials, labor, and land scarcity. Stocks and productive assets also help preserve wealth by generating income and benefiting from economic growth. More recently, some investors have turned to cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin, due to their limited supply and decentralized structure. However, digital assets remain highly volatile and carry significant risks. While no strategy guarantees protection, history suggests that assets with limited supply tend to retain value more effectively than cash during long periods of inflation. The reality of modern money. The global financial system is built on a delicate balance between economic growth, debt, and monetary policy. Inflation, while often viewed negatively, plays a central role in maintaining this balance. Moderate inflation encourages spending, supports investment, and helps economies expand. At the same time, it gradually erodes purchasing power, making it essential for individuals to understand how money works and plan accordingly. For most people, the key lesson is simple: holding large amounts of cash over long periods may not preserve wealth. Understanding inflation and adapting financial strategies accordingly has become an essential part of navigating modern economic life. Share your thoughts in the comments. How do you protect your money from inflation? For more videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.